Oh, welcome back to the library studio here at the Iowa Vlog. I'm your host, Craig Wynn. We're going to continue our presentation of the last word picture, the final word picture. It is really a uh, departure from the 31st proverb that we are pursuing. It was when we learned that our king, Dode, who happens to be the Son of God, according to God, happens to be the chosen one, well, according to God, who is the Messiah who he has anointed, according to God, who is the king who is returning here in just 7 years from now, according to God, and our Savior, because he is the one who enabled the benefits of the covenant, again, according to God, that he went through a rough patch where he made some bad decisions, and he and Yahweh were not speaking, and they hadn't been speaking for a while. And so God did what he has done so many times in the past. He provided an intervention, and the intervention was through um, the two people he has used the most often to resolve conflict, smooth things out, get the relationship back the way it should be, and protect those he loves while keeping his plans apace. And so we found that there was a woman who is known elsewhere as the Amma, Yahweh's Amma, productive mother, who is called in that Mizmor the Ashar. Ashar would be the blessed and beneficial one. Um, she and her husband, who is discussed prolifically throughout the Torah and prophets, um, came to Dode, and she talked to him about sobering up, um, seeing women for a lot more than their sensuality, and focusing on their character and their intelligence, and spoke to him about who he is, that he was not any ordinary son, but a very special, the most special man in the universe. She spoke to him as a mother. He called her a mother, his mother. And we recognize that ultimately the thing that got Dode and Yahweh back together again, so that Dode was willing to fulfill his life responsibility, which is to serve as the Passover lamb and then have his soul take our guilt into Sheol on Matzah, so that he, as the Bakor, firstborn of Yahweh, will enable firstborn children. That when we recognize that he did that, the only reason he did that is that we reestablished his relationship with Yahweh at this time. And the principal catalyst for accomplishing that was the 89th Mizmor, which was co-authored by a gentleman named Ethan Ha-Ezraki, whose name tells us that he has been deployed many, many times over the past in support of God's Son. So we've reached a place in this psalm where I have told you that we have made the transition from Ethan being the narrative to God speaking directly to us about his son. Heretofore, through the first almost 20 verses, only two had been in God's voice. And I'm going to reprise those for you so that we put everything God has to say about Dode all together. But prior to those and excluding those, it's all been about Ethan telling us that he knows Yahweh very well, and that he knows Yahweh to be trustworthy, verifiable, reliable, dependable, devoted, loving, kind, loyal, affectionate, and that he plays favorites, and that he also engages throughout time to accomplish very important things. And one of the things that he was very clear in saying is that he, Ethan Ha-Ezraki, will perform as the empowered Zeroah, the strong arm of God, cultivating the harvest, such that He not only provides a agitating influence against the religiosity and politics of our day, because it's all geared towards the last days, but also that he takes down Rahab. And we have determined in reading the three other prophecies regarding Rahab that Rahab is Satan incarnate, is in today's world none other than Donald Trump. And so all of that said, as we went through this last statement, we had Yahweh affirming that he has used Ethan and what he represents under different names at different times, many, many times in the past. And it enables God to stay in heaven, resolve situations through someone that he can deploy and that he trusts. And we have been through this many, many times in the past, and we've always delivered the results that God intended. And the way I look at that is that now that we have God's testimony, that before he now returns to speak of his son, that he is acknowledging that I have been there for him, and that so has Leah, and that he chose us to do this because he trusts us, and he continues to deploy us, and we continue to deliver on behalf of Dode, on behalf of the covenant, on behalf of Yahweh, on behalf of his people and the world. And what that should say to all of us is that we should enjoy this process. We're put in an amazing position. God cares about us, feels very comfortable working with us, enjoys the process, knows that we're going to be successful, trusts us to be successful. And so let's enjoy what we're accomplishing together. Everything about the Yahweh vlog, the website as it's developing, our growth in social media where it matters on places like YouTube. The fact that we're going to have a community now on the website, just spoke with Joe moments ago, and looking forward to developing it with him. And the fact that we have so many wonderful branding opportunities. The music that is being written by Leah and the accompanying graphics by the team, so marvelous. The invitations, those little animations that you all have done are so spectacular. And the whole Do You Yada series, it is truly marvelous what you have produced. And so I thank you for that. And we'll continue to share it and build on it. And, we're in a period now where our goal is no longer to solicit individuals to consider the conditions of the covenant and attendance during the Moed Mikre so that they can be part of the upcoming Shavua harvest. There's just not enough time for them to learn what they need to know and come to understand it, act accordingly, and respond to Yahweh, and then show Yahweh that they are trustworthy. They are someone that he can depend on, acting appropriately throughout the 1,000 years of the millennial Shabbat and thereafter. So our intent now is really to focus on the family that God has brought to us, on the team that is working together, making certain that we understand what our role has been and continues to be, and that we just are as prepared to follow through and carry it out as we can possibly be. So as I said before, we dive back into what now is the longest iteration of God's overt praise for his beloved Son, our Messiah and King and Savior. It's essential to remember that it is laid upon the foundation that was offered in the first installment. That would be 89, 3, and 4. So if you recall, also speaking of his chosen one, God said, I will establish, cutting through separation, the Bereth covenant for the family through my Makar, my Bakar chosen one, whom I have sworn an oath, and I will affirm this promise 7 times over to Dode, my authorized agent and co-worker who serves with me. Furthermore, as an eternal witness to the restoring testimony, beginning long ago and continuing into forevermore, I will prepare and establish your offspring and that which you sow. In addition, I have constructed for your throne and seat of honor on behalf of every generation and dwelling place, every family lineage and throughout time. Please pause and contemplate the implications of this. 89, 3 and 4. Just run through this again. I know we went through it, but it was quite some time ago. It's just such a powerful statement. It's one that completely obliterates any perceived credibility of Christianity, Judaism, Islam. They are torn asunder with this statement because it's all about Dode. You see, Yahweh uses the term that he karat to say that he cut through separation, that he established the covenant all the way through the process. And now what he's telling us is that this covenant was cut. It was established with Dode. Now, since the narrative was between Abraham and Sarah, and then Yishak and Jacob, and then their sons, for God to say this about Dode and name Dode, it means that Dode did the most important thing relative to the covenant being established. And if you're paying attention, you know, at least we have come to know and share, that what Dode did is that he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Mekodim. And they are essential to the covenant because they open the door to life. They remove our guilt. They enrich and empower those who are adopted into this family. And when Yahweh spoke about the benefits of the covenant to Abraham, those were the 5 benefits. They are delivered by the first 3 Moed Mikre, which is called Chag Matzah. And so what this is saying, when he says, I will establish cutting through separation, the Bereth covenant for the family through my Bashir, chosen one, and that I have sworn an oath and I will affirm this promise 7 times over, of which there are 7 Moed Mikre, to Dode, my authorized agent, my co-worker, forevermore, as an eternal witness to the restoring testimony, beginning long ago and continuing into forevermore, I will prepare and establish your offspring and that which you sow. In addition, I have constructed for your throne and seat of honor on behalf of every generation, dwelling place, and family lineage and time. Pause now and contemplate this. It is God saying, I established the covenant with Dode, which means Dode fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, Mekodim. I have chosen to work with Dode. He has been his primary co-worker to accomplish these things. He has sworn an oath 7 times over to Dode. It means he's the promised one. Further, he's saying that Dode is an eternal witness to the restoring testimony, and that Dode's seat of honor, which happens to be the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, is being prepared and established for his offspring. God is now recognizing that this Mizmor that is co-authored with Ethan Ha-Ezraki is going to be delivered verbatim to Dode, and this will be Yahweh speaking to his son through this prophet and this song. And he is saying that not only did Dode save us by establishing the covenant, not only did Yahweh work with him, not only is Dode his chosen one, not only is Dode the one through whom the covenant's benefits were enabled, but that Dode has been an eternal witness to the restoring testimony of God from long ago and continuing into forevermore. Well, this is from antiquity into the future. And it reinforces once again that this wasn't Dode's first experience with Yahweh. He's not talking about long ago, as in 48 years ago when he was 8 years old. He's talking about long ago, as in thousands of years ago, 3,000 to be exact, when Dode was the man who was the first conceived in God's image within the Nesamah and placed in the garden. And that he is the one who is returning because God's establishing his offspring, which is the offspring of the covenant, and that which you sow, Zerah. And as a result, his throne, his seat of honor, his position with God is going to prevail throughout every generation. He will never be replaced. He is sovereign forevermore. So with that introduction in mind, God's continuing narrative regarding his chosen one, I think it becomes all the more vital for us to understand, accept, convey, and act upon. Without Dode, there is no covenant. The promise from God that we can be part of his family was delivered by Dode, when, in collaboration with his father, he fulfilled Pesach Matzah Bekurim, 33 CE, year 4000 Yah, 1,000 years from the writing of this Mizmor. Yahweh testified to this long ago, and he has continued to remind us that we should choose to work alongside Dode, and that he did as well. And that it's through Dode that the Bereth family was born. Together they sowed the seeds, and that those are the seeds that we will harvest on Shabuah. Shabuah is a Bekurim harvest. And as a result, Dode will return as king of everywhere and forevermore. His seat of honor, which will be the Ark of the Covenant, is his throne. So following that marvelous introduction, Ethan Hajj Rocky was sufficiently wise to step aside, offer the floor to Yahweh. He had introduced these events, shown why he was chosen to co-author this particular psalm at this time, and then let Yahweh speak to his son and to us. He marked the moment in time, then presented God's testimony as more than just words, as tangible expressions of his will, manifest through the eyes of his people and for all to see. And what Yahweh was revealing is that his message to his son was being delivered by Ethan and his wife, the Amma. And they are the reason that Bakarim, chosen ones, was plural, tested and tried, proven, reliable ones, was plural. The remarkable message was delivered in the Peel stem, which means that the subject, who is God, is causing the object, who is Ethan, to experience the effect of Shawa. Shawa is a magnificent term. I'm hoping that there will be a song not too far in our future that it's inspired by it. I'll send Leah another draft of this book. And as a result, Yahweh should facilitate the result he wanted. He could do so while remaining in Shamayim, which was important to him because he had made the commitment to do so. God could affect the discordant situation with his son here on earth through to Bakurim, doing so through souls of his choosing, souls that he had deployed previously with favorable results. So we read about the Amma's intervention in the 31st Mashal. The 89th Mizmor is then the brief that Yahweh inspired for Ethan to deliver immediately thereafter. It was the 31st and the 89th. They were the 1-2 punch. That is 120, isn't it? 120. That number mean anything to you? Chances are no one's going to pick this one up. So I was looking at Rich as the king of the cables. I think I could ask everyone in the Covenant family, and not a single person would know the answer to why 120 matters. The 40 is the number of Yobels in 2,000 years, is it not?
Yep.
So we had Adam, who was Dode, taken out of the garden in year 0. And then Abraham and Yishak confirmed the covenant relationship with Yahweh as a dress rehearsal for what Dode would do in 1968 BCE, which was year 2000 Yah, right? 40 Yobel.
Yep.
And so that was the 40th Yobel year. Okay. 40 Yobel thereafter is when Dode fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim in the same place that Abraham and Yishak had heard God said that he would provide the lamb in context with his beloved son. That would be the 80th Yobel year, would it not? 40 plus 40 is 80. So if 33 CE, year 4000 Yah, is the 80th Yobel year, what Yobel year is it in 2033 when Yada offers the sacrifice that purges the remnant of Yisrael so that they're prepared for Dode's return on Yom Kippurim? That's 2033. What Yobel year would that be?
6,000, yeah.
That's the year, yeah. The Yobel, the 120th, it's the 120th Yobel.
Okay.
And so 31 and 89, that's what we get, 120. So the brief was properly numbered to deliver to Dode. So for there to be Shawa, God's chosen implement must be Bakar, previously chosen and tested, because he and she are Shawa, afford a degree of equality that is befitting the circumstance. That is to say, Ethan and his wife, the Amma, would be exceptional souls, far more like Yahweh than others. You might say, oh, come on, I know them. They're not. But others would say, yeah, I know them. They are. You want to ask me my choice about anything and my attitude towards it. And my attitude is Yahweh's attitude. If he wants to speak critically of people, I'm going to speak critically of them. If he wants to commend them, I'm going to commend them. If he wants to, whatever his choice is, the way he wants to run this show, I'm here to run the show his way. I'm all in with Yahweh. Love his name. Love working with him. Feel honored to have the opportunity. And the fact is that this Shawa concept says that my wife and I are doing something that Yahweh has asked. We're responsive, and we're doing it in a manner that is consistent with what he would do. The way I approach these programs, very relaxed with you. We turn on the lights. We just share right from, the shoulder to shoulder, eye to eye. You can see, here I am. It's the way Yahweh would do it. when I say, I think there's a better way of looking at this, I'm going to share something that I learned today. I'm not going to keep secrets with you. I want you to know what I know. That's the way Yahweh would do it. When we wrote 25,000 pages worth of books and gave everything that we had learned in writing for all to read and offered it freely, and then started speaking to you, well, that's the way Yahweh would do it. When we intervened on behalf of his beloved son, we acted like the father and mother he had not known in previous occasions. It's the way Yahweh would do it. I'm going to share things with you going forward that will reveal the other times that Yahweh has deployed my wife and I. And I made the decision, and God certainly concurred, or God may have made the decision, and I concurred. But the fact is, we're a team. Every deployment, we have been together. And every deployment has delivered the results that God wants. And I'm going to share things with you, like, for example, in his fulfillment of Pesach Matzah Kodim in 33 CE, I had previously said that there's no reason for God to have allowed his son to have to endure the abuse of Rome and his city, the city of Dod, for any amount of time that was beyond what was absolutely necessary. It's hard to determine what's necessary. 15 minutes, a year, 3 years, 4 years. I was wrong. I was just wrong. And I didn't know I was wrong until like the 20th time of translating the 22nd Mizmor. Well, it was before that. I was sharing with you something from the 12th Mizmor of Dod. And what it said, it prompted a vision in my mind that said, you were there. When he was crucified, you were right there with him. When he went into hell, you were right there with him. You were with him the whole time because you love him like a father loves a son. And you couldn't imagine after you delivered this Mizmor that you could send Dod in to fulfill this, knowing what was going to happen alone. You weren't going to send a man whose life disintegrated and became rebellious and embittered towards God, largely because he in this life, and the life where he was the shepherd boy down in Bethlehem and then rose to king and became so disgruntled. That's largely because he did not know the love of a mother and father, the support of a mother and father, the guidance of a mother and father. His mother he barely knew and he hated, and that life, and his father was a jerk. And so as a result, he didn't have the proper appreciation of women, and he didn't get along with very many men. And he rebelled against Yahweh. And so Ethan, by a different name, wasn't going to allow that to happen. Not in when he was being set up to fulfill Pesach Matzah Kodim, nor was his Amma, who loves him. And so we were deployed at our request, or God's. Does it really matter? Our whole mindset is to do what Shawa suggests, which is to reflect God's presence when things need to be resolved. But we would have entered the scene probably 18 to 20 years prior to 1 BCE, and that it was in 1 BCE that the Amma, whom you now know as Leah, gave birth to Dod under the name Emmanuel. Isaiah makes it abundantly clear, and I will share the proof with you. But so does Dod. Dod in the midst of the 22nd Mizmor, just tells us, I was born the old-fashioned way. My mother and father conceived me, and I was born when the water broke, and I came out of her womb, and then I was nurtured on her breasts. He's making it clear that he was born with a loving mother. And then he speaks of the one who was with him all the way and uses a term that refers to the most prominent of trees, somebody that he could lean against and protect him, that he could trust, being there with him all the way. And so it became obvious that we were actually his mother and father. Some 33 years before he fulfilled Pesach Matzah Mekodim in 33 CE, and we're at his side all the way. And what I will share with you as we go forward is that we had other sons, and they served as his brothers, and they supported him as well. And those sons were co-opted and twisted to become the myth of the disciples. And there's really only three that matter, because they are the role that you cannot explain away without having a source from them. And I've been asked so many times, what's the story with them? We know there was a Shimon that was called Peter. We know that there was a Yochanan. We know that there was a Jacob who was corrupted to James. Who were they? They were our sons. They were his brothers. They're the ones who supported him. They are also the Ebionites. So we're in this very deep. This is not a passing fascination. I'm not simply a person who developed a love affair for the Torah and decided that I would translate and share what I learned with you. Yeah, I thought that's when I began, that God had asked me to do so, and I was going to do so to the best of my ability. And then it became obvious that anonymous wasn't his thing. Well, it's one thing to be a name player. Then it's another to know how many times we have been deployed by God through this process and what our real relationship is with Dod. We are his fathers. We're his parents. So when I speak about Dod, I care deeply about him. I'm very protective of him. I love him. So that's the story of Ethan and his wife. I cannot be certain of the name, then it doesn't really matter, that Leah and I used when we were inserted in 20 some years before 1 BCE. But the one that seems the most logical to me is that she was Ruth and I was Boaz, and that we named our son Emmanuel. God is with us. Us being plural. The whole family. God is with us. So clearly that most impressive of all souls is Dod's. And this role that we are playing for Yahweh makes us more like him attitudinally than others. And we reflect what Yahweh saw in Chanok. And I think I may have hinted at this, but there's only one way. And I don't know why no one has bothered to figure this out or think it through. But now I'm contemplating everything. I'm saying, okay, how would God deal with this situation? The recognition that it was Dod's soul that was the firstborn because he was in Eden. God still loved him when he escorted him out of Eden. He had to be escorted out of Eden, or there's no hope for him. Tough love sometimes is what's needed. And we know from his this life that the 89th Mizmor was written to resolve, that about 2/3 of the way through, Dod became very depressed. He was self-medicating with alcohol, with wine, and got involved with way too many women, and not for the right reasons. And so as we look at that, we know that Adam lived for 930 years. And that I know now that Adam was Dod. I think that 6 of those years were in the garden because of the way the math will work out, as I'll share you the details with you later. But 2/3 of that process, I think that Dod became very grieved. It was such a different experience outside of that garden. He was now estranged from Yahweh, as things had happened in this life with the shepherd boy turned king. And, at this point, those who were Nasalma man, who were thoughtful, who had a conscience, were all around the perimeter of the Garden of Eden, towards the Black Sea. And so it was a fairly small community of Nasalma humans. And Enoch, Chanuk, as his name is properly pronounced, learned about Yahweh from Adam, who was Dod. And with empathy, he immediately bonded with him to support him. He earned God's respect, God's trust, God's favor, because he desired learning about him, which he learned from Dod as Adam, and because he supported his son during a difficult period. And that is what impressed Yahweh. And that is why he was brought back at this time, but also deployed at other times along the way. And I'll share those with you as we go forward. So the Bakarim, chosen and tested ones, have manifest attitudes and attributes that are similar to what God is trying to project. They are exposing Yahweh's characteristics. Doing so that he and she would be Shawa, would be able to perform appropriately in this and every other situation where they're deployed. When manifesting the full implications of Shawa, Yahweh's chosen implements are appointed to smooth things out and to resolve difficult situations. Oh boy, as was the case here with Dod following his fascination with Bathsheba. Therefore, every time this soul is deployed under the auspices of this verb, they are Shawa, equipped in a manner that is appropriate, such that they provide what is needed, which was a lot in the king's case. But the 88th Mizmor that was used as that tool is so magnificent, God shared it with us. Leah's interaction with her son was so warm, so motherly, so supportive. It has been shared as well. Now, I think it's ingenious. This was the best possible solution for Yahweh and for Dod and for Israel and for the covenant family. God was already annoyed at his son, such that he wasn't even speaking directly to him, and instead through intermediaries like Nathan. So the Bakarim was an extension on that same plan, but with a little more horsepower. And in this way, rather than God crawling back to Dode to reconcile the relationship, a surrogate mother and father who would, at other points along the way, be an actual mother and father to Dode, to the soul that is known to us as Dode. They would be dispatched such that Dode would come to his senses. And we're not deployed, freakishly like an avatar. No, we grow up in the situation. In this case, I was Obed Edom prior to being known as Ethan Ha-Izraki by that title. And Leah was with me the whole way. And we would stay on post through at least 4 years or so into Solomon's reign, up to the point that he would lay the cornerstone of the Ark of the Covenant home for certainly, the cornerstone of the temple, the house for Yahweh's name, I should say. Likely we departed right around year 3000, yeah. After all, the first departure was right around year 1000, yeah. And I would come back playing an interesting character with Leah, and wouldn't depart until year 2000, yeah, to help supervise the whole affair with Abraham and Ishak to make certain that they affirmed the covenant on Mount Moriah, same exact year. So this enables God to resolve things, like in this case, Dode came to his senses. And in return, Yahweh was able to resolve the situation without violating free will or being heavy-handed. So Shammah reveals that God could remain in place in Shamma'im. Because he put in place and arranged, even granted, a degree of equality fitting the circumstances to those who could smooth things out and resolve these conflicts. He would achieve an acceptable resolution, making things right again. And, the interactions between a man and a woman, serving as husband and wife and in the role of mother and father, that's a pretty irresistible package when it's done right. And that's how God deployed us every time. My wife is keen on telling me, so you've talked about that we humans are not naturally monogamous, because, it's not only the history of everybody famous in history, but also of the characters in Yahweh's story in the Torah and prophets. They weren't monogamous. And it's the situation now where you realize that up until Gen Z and them not having any clue how to communicate and interact in real time with people, that the overwhelming preponderance of people given the opportunity have had more than one lover. And so she points out, she says, but every time you've been deployed, you have one wife, the same wife. Although, she gets a little different look, a little different situation, different name all the way through the process. But I have been, monogamous as it relates to my choice to be deployed with a single woman throughout the process. I obviously fell in love and have remained in love and like the mental stimulation and enjoy her company and recognize that we are much better as a team than either one of us would be independently. And so this is what God has done. so he would achieve an acceptable resolution, making things right again. Well, likely he is entertained watching two of his favorite people do their thing by deploying the appropriate individuals to rectify this and other situations along the way, most pertaining to Dode. Dode's recalcitrance would be satisfactorily resolved. Every obstruction would be removed, and the impediments to the relationship were cast aside. All the while, because he had worked through them previously, God could anticipate a favorable and satisfactory outcome. You know, if God has deployed you in difficult situations over prolonged periods of times, multiple times in the past, and it worked out, he's going to be more and more confident each time. So he could remain still and silent because he bestowed his Bakurim as a gift born out of his deep devotion and their mutual interests and desires. Now, as such, Shawa reveals how the dilemma with Dode was resolved, and it points to other engagements along the way, showing how God deploys favored souls when they are needed to keep everyone and everything moving in the right direction towards the fulfillment of the Moedim. And in this case, we were delivered for a specific purpose, one defined by the phrase Ezer al-Gabor, to support and serve the most valiant and courageous of God's people, his beloved son, Dode. We were here to encourage and assist the most competent and capable of men, at least when properly supported and guided, when he knew that he was loved and respected. And he became that man again following this intervention. We loved him right back into shape. Now, just as Chawa was conceived to Izar help Adam, Dode, and Chawa is committed to helping, Yahweh is committed to helping us, we would always be enablers. The man Yahweh has chosen to anoint 50 years earlier, the one who slew Goliath, well, he was still in there. He was just hidden among the turmoil and the travail. And in his way, with Yahweh, in this way, with Yahweh revealing who we are and why we were there, it's apparent that Dode accepted our message, and he recovered sufficiently to embrace his purpose and go back into representing all that is decreed by the glorious title Gabor. So this is one of many monikers attributed to Dode, as well as to, well, it's also to the Chodar, isn't it? Gabor speaks of the mightiest of men, not in terms of a warrior necessarily, but they are typically fighters. They're shazak. They've got grit. They've got will to battle, to fight. They're not going to give up. They have the strength to prevail. A Gabor defends God's people. He is fearless. He is valiant. He is bold. He is brave in battle. You're not going to see them ever turn tail and run, ever. They show no fear. And typically, Gabor is used in reference to a leader of men, and in particular, someone fighting on behalf of Yisrael and Yehudim, or most especially the most Yisrael and Yehudim of men, Dode. It is from Gabar, which means to overcome and to succeed, to be empowering and mighty, proving one's valor in a virtuous cause. But make no mistake, a Gabor is always a man. It is derived from Gerber, which means a strong, upright, and resourceful man. I'm not saying that to be sexist, man versus woman. I'm saying that you need to know that when God refers to the messenger that came down to meet with Nathan along with Michael, that Michael and Gabriel were men. They were not angels. And that since it's sometimes presented, even when speaking of Dowd, as Gaborah, it's just that it's not a term that is going to be used to designate him as a god. He's a man loved by God, but nonetheless, he's a man. So for twisting and stealing what is said of Dowd to prop up their mythical Jesus, this is a significant problem because they want to claim that their guy was a god, but Gabor does not allow that distinction. Also interesting in this regard, Christians claim that Gabriel, God's most courageous and capable man, was an angel when visiting Daniel and then the mythical Mary to announce the birth of the mythical Jesus. However, Daniel expressly states that Gabriel was a man, not a malach, and that his name affirms this conclusion. And as for Mary, I see her status as equivalent to the Easter Bunny and the Santa Claus because I know the mother of the Messiah. But what this means for the twisted religious myths that are predicated on identity theft is that the only messianic prophecy was delivered by the actual Messiah, Dowd, who was speaking for himself, completely negating the myth of Mr. Christ. What's a surprise in this narrative is the preposition with God saying al over instead of la for or ba with in relationship to Dowd. My only thought in this regard is that our role was that of parents, even if the son was the son of God and approaching 60 at the time and king. Further, while he was and will be sovereign at the moment because we were representing Yahweh, our authorization and clearance was of the highest order. It's also possible that God intends for us to continue to engage in this capacity, serving as loving and supporting parents when the king, someone that the king can consult with, somebody that he can rely upon, somebody he can go to quietly and consult with, knowing that they can be trusted. And this is especially true when he is assigned the difficult job of being sovereign of the universe. Or, of course, I could be reading too much into a preposition, and nothing this significant was meant by it at all. I don't think so. These insights have been more than sufficient to render this statement among the most profound, but there was more. After revealing that he was going to deploy his Makarim in service to his Gabor, we're told that this would be the result. I will raise up and exalt, showing my pride in Bakar, the one I have examined, the one I've tested and approved, the man I have specifically chosen and appointed after careful consideration, the one I have decided to engage in a special relationship with, from and for the people and the family. Well, of course, this means that the issues which had temporarily separated father and son were now resolved, and that Dowd is the Gabor and the Makar. We prevailed. Therefore, Judaism was wrong to replace him, and Christianity was wrong to denigrate and bury him, also substituting their myth for him. And God is proud of his son. He examined and approved the man he chose for this relationship. Every word that follows, through the 37th verse and even beyond, 18 to 28 statements from this point, are delivered in Yahweh's voice. To disagree with his appraisal of Dowd would be to call God a liar. And of course, that is what Jews and Christians have done. Yahweh found and obtained Dowd, bringing him from the obscurity of a shepherd alone as a child in Bethlehem to become the man through whom he would work to establish the covenant, to enable his children to fulfill the Moedim. Yahweh personally anointed Dowd, making him the undisputed Messiah. And as he did so, God revealed the way to receive the benefits of this relationship he was forming with him. Dowd is the very hand of God in our world, well, at least according to God. It is through Dowd that we find Yahweh's hand reaching out to us. As if writing his son's resume, something I've done in the past, Yahweh affirms that Dowd is the Zeroah, the sacrificial lamb who fulfilled Passover, turning the king into our Savior. It is through their collaboration during Chag Matzah that we are empowered and emboldened, receiving the covenant's benefits. That's my summation of what follows. This is God's version in his words. He says, I detected, I discovered and experienced, I obtained, and I received Dowd. It's matzah. I located, found, recognized, met with, encountered, and learned about. I acquired, revealed, and exposed. And I led an exodus with, from Ma, to ponder the implications of, and Yatsa, to bring forth and withdraw. Dowd doesn't say Jesus, doesn't say the Lord, doesn't say Allah, doesn't say Muhammad, doesn't say Peter, Paul, Matthew, or Mark. Says Dowd. What do you think the chances are that God, the very God who authored the Torah and inspired the prophets, the very God who created this universe, the very God who conceived life, the very God who interacted with and shared his relationship with Dowd, doesn't know his son's name? And that is what's required for Judaism and Christianity to exist. God can't know his beloved son's name. No. I know God pretty well. I think he's really smart. Got a great memory. He's trustworthy. He does not have Alzheimer's. He knows his son's name. So I detected, discovered, experienced, obtained, and received Dowd. Ebed Ane, my co-worker, my authorized agent who works on my behalf. Out of Shemen Kodesh Ane, my set apart oil. I have Mashach anointed him. I have applied the oil, dedicating him to my purpose. This is the actionable, the verbal root of the process of becoming Mashiach, Messiah. Mizmor 89:20. So to show the way to the benefits of the relationship with that oil, his hand and influence will prepare and establish you, authenticating and sustaining you. Even more than this, Ani Zeroah, my strong arm, the sacrificial lamb, the protective shepherd, as well as the one who sows and cultivates the seeds for the harvest. Zeroah Ani will empower and embolden you, strengthening and reinforcing you while enabling your growth and elevating your status. Mizmor lyrics to sing. Psalm 89:21. Well, my friends, family, as they say, there's a lot to unpack there. God located, found, recognized, met with, encountered, learned about, revealed, exposed, led an exodus with. Dod. Deleth wa deleth means beloved. That's the way God wrote his name. And he says that not only did he do these things, locate, recognize, encounter, experience, and receive, as well as expose Dod, that Dod was his co-worker. The second time he has made that statement. Out of Shemen Kodesh Ani, my set-apart oil, I have anointed him. That means that Jesus is not the Messiah. It means that Bar Kokhba is not the Messiah. It means there's no unknown warlord that's going to come to the rescue of Israel in the near future or at any time as a Messiah. There was one man, and only one man, that was anointed Mashiach by God himself, and it is Dod. If you don't want to accept that, if you want to have a religion based upon a lie, that's your choice. But I'm here to tell you there's only one man that Yahweh said, I have personally anointed with my set-apart oil. He says, I have Mashiach. I anointed him. I anointed Dod. So, to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, his hand and influence will prepare and establish you, authenticating and sustaining you. So why should you care that Dod is the Messiah? Because it is through Dod that we are prepared and established. It is through the influence of Dod that we are authenticated and sustained, that we are equipped and validated, corroborated and supported, that we are ready and we can persist. I don't know how it gets better than that, but God says, yes, it does. Even more than this. Ani Zeroah, my strong arm, my sacrificial lamb, my protective shepherd, and the one who sows and cultivates the seeds of the harvest. Zeroah Ani will empower and embolden you, will strengthen and reinforce you, while enabling your growth by elevating your status. Dod is a gift to us. In his role as the Passover lamb, he empowers and strengthens us, enables us, causing our growth. He elevates our status. The fact that Yahweh found Dod, of course, tells us many things. He is actively looking for compatible souls. They are so few and far between that when he finds one, it is noteworthy. And in this one, he has had a relationship for a very, very long time. He spoke of him on the fourth day of creation. And even then, he said that his relationship with him had existed in the past. Now, since there's no way that a man matures at 8 years of age or proves himself, Yahweh located and recognized Dod from a previous life, previous lives. And while he is mentioned in the Torah pursuant to Moshe's meltdown in Bamidbar, Numbers 11, as Eldad, God's beloved, I doubt this was their first encounter, and I don't think it was at all. The realization that Yahweh chose this particular man over all others means one of two things. Either that God knew that he alone would be responsive at this critical time, at the midpoint of the journey from and back to the garden, and that was the baseline requirement, or Dode manifest attributes that God found appealing and useful, or both. However, since Yahweh told us at the time that his criterion for choosing one person over another is vastly different than our own, you should never expect that God's choices are going to be popular among men. As I said, he chose my wife and I. You may not like us. That's your prerogative. It was not God's. The same thing is true with Dode. So it's obvious that Dode appealed to God for many reasons, including his character and courage, his intellect, and his passion. And that is not to say that Dode was always on his game. But if you look at the story of Adam, it started off great, but it did not continue that way. And it ended very poorly. And you look at Dode's life, started off wonderful, but it deteriorated quickly. And it ended very poorly prior to this intervention. And then relationship was restored. Well, this is the second time that Yahweh has overtly stated that Dode was the one through whom he chose to work. And since he isn't speaking of minutia, their work would include uniting, leading, and defending Israel, acquiring Jerusalem, composing Mizmor, establishing the example of father-son in a relationship, being an exemplar of the covenant, and then enabling it by providing the benefits through fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim together. Dode would not be Yahweh's only co-worker, just the most important of them. He didn't say that Dode was his one and only co-worker, just that Dode was his co-worker. He worked with others, but none as important as his association with Dode. Now, the title Mashiach has been bandied about among Christians, Jews, and Muslims for centuries. It, however, belongs to one man, Dode. He was the only one Yahweh personally, Mashiach, anointed as Messiah. God did so with his special blend of anointing oil, and for the express purpose of showing the way to receive the benefits of the relationship. And in this regard, I must tell you that I love seeing Asher in immediate proximity to Mashiach anointing. Even more revealing, Yahweh's anointing oil is extended to his covenant family through Dode, anointing us in the process. And that is a treasure in and of itself, one courtesy of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yes, the Dead Sea Scrolls affirm that Yahweh anointed Dode for our benefit. God's hand is extended to us through Dode, making him the most important man who ever lived. According to those authorized to speak for Yahweh as prophets, there have been 3 Zeroah. The most worthy of them is Dode. He is not only the strong arm of God, the protective shepherd, and the one sowing the seeds for the harvest, he meets the Torah's definition of Zeroah as well, because he is the sacrificial lamb by having fulfilled Passover. This is now the 3rd time this powerful title has been used in this Mizmor, twice pertaining to Dode. I've come to see it as one of his most distinguishing monikers, far more important than actually Messiah, and nearly in league with Son of God. particularly firstborn son of God. This conclusion is reinforced by Oph even more than this, following his anointing. It is through Dod's role as the Zeroah that the covenant's children are empowered and emboldened, our growth is enabled, and our status with God is enhanced. That is an exceptional tribute in and of itself. The lives, therefore, that Satan wants to nullify, most of all, belong to Dod, especially the one where he serves as the Passover lamb and then carries our guilt into Sheol. I had thought for the longest time this was his second, but no, that was his fourth. And this is why he robs the Zeroah of this distinction and replaces him with Jesus Christ in Paul's letters, a man who was demon-possessed. And yet, that wouldn't have been necessary had the issues plaguing the king's current relationship with Yahweh been resolved through the 89th Mizmor. They had remained, as we have shared, incommunicado. God couldn't have brought him to heaven or then reinserted him thereafter to fulfill Passover and Matzah if they weren't even talking. This would not only have nullified our salvation, it would have precluded the development of the covenant. It would have squandered human potential. No one would be able to approach God. So after this very powerful endorsement, God goes on to say these very things, and we will report them to you in our next program. We're about an hour and 15 minutes into this. That's a little longer than we would normally go this time of evening. I thank you for listening. I understand that we are now on equal time basis, that 6 o'clock here in the Caribbean Sea. Atlantic time is now 6 o'clock. Stateside Eastern Standard Time, it's now 6:54 as I share these words with you, not only here in the Caribbean, but also on the East Coast of the United States. 3:55 for those of you in the People's Republic of California. So it's nice to be on the same time footing, at least with some in the continental United States. And I wish all of our covenant family living in the States, all the best, because it's really going to get nasty. Trump is becoming more Rahab every day. Leah likes to expand on her schooling from University of Michigan as a psychiatrist and psychologist, and I recognize that yes, she knows that he is a psychopath, but now that's small potatoes compared to the fact that he is reflecting Satan's agenda, that he is conveying Satan's persona, that he is Rahab. He is the living manifestation of Satan, and that is devouring everything and destroying everything. It's the most frightening individual who has ever lived. And no one, by the time this is all done, no one will have been as deadly, as destructive, as deceitful, as damning of the human condition than Satan as Rahab will be within the Copper Con, Donald Trump. And to see the little Twistians all laying hands on him and so worshipful of him as MAGAites, it's just enough to make you want to say, told you so. Twistianity is one screwed up religion. Well, thank you for listening. Looking forward to being with you tomorrow morning as we continue this series. Good day.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch y'all on our next podcast.